So I would like to introduce, if you don't know him yet, Tobias Nyholm, who's going to talk about framework bundles today, actually without them. I don't know if you know, but Tobias, he's a core team member, also part of the care team with me, a really good partner in the care team. So I'll let you enjoy his talk, and I will be here for the question at the end of the talk. Enjoy.
Just 1 second. Someone lost his phone, or her phone, I don't know. We found it. So, well, I have it, so just come by and, all right, so no one. Oh.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, my name is Tobias. I'm going to talk about Symfony without the framework bundle. And I have a Twitter handle if you want to ask me questions later. And also, this is like the first time I'm doing this talk in a real conference. So if you have any feedback, just visit Join In and rate me. Tell me what I should do better. Tell me what I was doing good. I will also publish the slides there. So if you think something's interesting, the slides will be in Join In. Fair enough. And the reason I'm doing this talk is because we would like to care about performance, right? I mean, going bare is super cool right now for some reason. And also a big reason why I'm doing this talk is because it's fun. Performance is fun, right? Right? Thank you. So, short about me. I work at Happier doing plenty of things over there. We match people and companies on soft skills. I do plenty of Symfony stuff. I run the PHP meetups in Stockholm, Sweden. And I also do plenty of open source. I started my open source career on a SymfonyCon in Paris, 2015. PSR6 just came out. So me and my friend, let's build adapters from PSR6 to Doctrine. So we did that, and then we actually implemented the interface with actual storage. So we created PHP cache. And at the same time, I started to be interested in HTTP plug, which is an abstraction over HTTP client. And if you do HTTP clients, you do API clients, and you do mail clients. And then I wrote, this is how you should do the best API client. And I'm currently maintaining Guzzle and Bus, and I'm currently writing PSRs and geocode. I do plenty. The most interesting library on this slide is the NSA one. NSA totally violates class privacy. So accessing private properties or methods is simple with NSA. It's good for okay, maybe it's good for testing. I don't know, but it's a fun library. So, frameworks are slow. That's something I hear on Twitter. That's something it's easy to say, oh, I don't like frameworks. Frameworks are slow. And self-claimed experts just throw this out there. And I want to investigate: is there any truth to this, and what does this really mean? So, it's 3 statements. Frameworks are slow, and let's do them one by one. I mean, are slow. I think that means poor performance, right? Could we agree if you say something is slow, it means that it has low performance. And the first part is frameworks. What is a framework? I actually wonder this. I've asked this question so many times, the last year. What is a framework? And more specifically, what is this? For each people I've asked, or each person I've asked, I got a different answer. What is Symfony? Could someone brave shout out right now? What is Symfony? Yes, Symfony is a framework, sure, but what is frameworks? What is? Collection of components to make an application, sure. I'll follow up with which component. Yeah. So let's spend a few minutes to investigate this. Back in the days, when we installed Symfony 1.4, we did something like this. We did an SVN checkout, and we checked out everything. We checked out vendors, and we checked out everything. Oh, it was only 2 vendors for Symfony back then. And we got the Symfony folder. And we knew everything in this Symfony folder was Symfony. Everything outside of it was our code. Right? So it was easy to see if you ran a command in this folder, it was a Symfony command. Right? So it was a clear definition. This folder, this is the framework. A few years later, Symfony 2.8 came around. and we install it with Composer, and we fetch all the dependencies. And we still got a Symfony folder, but just in vendor Symfony. And we still have this, like, yeah, we know this is the Symfony folder. It's a controller in here, it's a class in here, it's a Symfony class, right? Symfony 3.4, pretty much the same thing. They removed a lot of code, all deprecated code, but it's a lot of the same thing. We still have the Symfony folder. You're awfully quiet, and am I talking too fast? Do you understand what I'm talking, or is it way too easy? I mean, okay, as long as you're pleased, just tell me if you're not. Anyhow, Symfony 3.4, pretty much the same. However, this is the exciting things. In Symfony 4, we didn't have this folder anymore. I mean, there's not much code here at all. Sure, we got like some collections of dependencies over here somehow, but it's not many dependencies and not much. I mean, the composer, if you run this, the composer file you get, I mean, you probably notice, it looks like this. And here we basically got like some PHP extensions, and we got the console, which is a good library, and we have Flex, which basically is the composer plugins. That's not really code. Then we have the FrameworkBundle and YAML. So I ask you, which of these dependencies is Symfony? FrameworkBundle, yeah, sure. But one could argue that Symfony is if you're using the HTTP kernel and HTTP foundation. If you're using those two libraries, then you have a Symfony application. However, does that mean that if you have a PSR 7 implementation, do you have a Zen framework then? Or do you have a Slim framework if you're using PSR 7? I'm also hesitant. I'm not sure. I mean, we are using Symfony. This is the FrameworkBundle composer file. We are using. Oh, you don't see this. I highlighted. You are using foundation and kernel in here. I don't think this is really enough. I'm still hesitant. And so if we can't have a Symfony folder, and we can't point out a single dependency that this is a Symfony dependency or a group of dependencies, what should we look at? So if I want to do a different approach. I want to try to visualize this. I have a totally scientific graph here. And in early Symfony versions, you had to have your controller has to be in a folder called controller, right? You remember this in Symfony 2? And your commands had to end with the suffix command in the class, or else it didn't work for some reason. And the path from the path for your configuration and views has to be in a specific path, or else it didn't work. And this was like magic. This is what we, as a group, Symfony Professional, knew about, because we know where to put our configuration and stuff. And I would like to say this kind of magic that Symfony was providing in Symfony 2 has been slightly decreased. And the line from what Symfony is and what is, I mean, the line between this is Symfony has been more and more inexplicit. And since the magic reduced and the line has also been more inexplicit, does it mean that Symfony is equal to magic and less is better? I'm not sure. And you all been very pleased with my animation. I'm thank you for that. For me, Symfony is a community, like everybody of us that is here. I mean, everybody who writes issues on GitHub, everybody that makes comments on Stack Overflow, everybody that's tweeting, everybody that's just write a message on Slack now and then. We are Symfony. And Symfony is also an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem of bundles, ecosystem of packages, ecosystem of libraries. I mean, even gist and Docker images. Everything is Symfony. And also, whatever we make, whatever we in the community make and make public is part of this, what I would like to call Symfony. And I'm not only talking about code. I'm also talking about like blog posts. I'm also talking about meetups. I'm talking about you in the local bar chatting about Symfony some evening. And I'm also talking about tweets. I mean, so it's super easy to contribute to this Symfony. It's just sending a tweet saying, hey, I like the conference. That's also what I would like to call a contribution. I left this slide blank intentionally, so you give you a chance to contribute to Symfony. Okay, you can contribute later, that's fine. But what I want to say is, since Symfony is a community, an ecosystem, and whatever we make, Framework is just something we put on packages, right? It's just our code and the code we depend on. The code I write, hey, I need this piece of software, that's part of what I call this framework. So I want to claim that frameworks is just our code, and apparently the statement says that our code is slow or has poor performance. I don't really like people saying that our code has poor performance, so let's talk about performance for a while. There are 3 important rules in performance. These rules are always true. Pause for effect. These rules are always true no matter what field in computer science you are. No matter what language you are, these rules are always true. Here they are. Rule number 1, buy a better server. This is by far the cheapest way to get a better performance application. It's not the most fun way, but it's by far the cheapest because hardware is way cheaper than software, always. And software is humans and people. Rule number 2, cache, 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 cache everything. I mean, this is great, this is awesome, this is what most people do. I mean, if you just throw up Varnish to handle 95% of your traffic, of course it will be way quicker, right? And I say most people do, and this is, if you ever seen a talk like, hey, how we handle 1 million requests a second, this is the answer. And there's plenty of talks, plenty of videos, plenty of blog posts that mention this. This talk is not one of them. It's going to be one this afternoon, but this talk is not one of them. What I want to talk about is number 3. It's basically run less code. This is the only thing that makes your application execute faster. If you're waiting for something like, you just include this library, you were wrong. I mean, this is how it makes your application run faster. I know most of you have written this or seen this or know of this. This is machine code or assembler or whatever. This is basically, in PHP writing echo hello world. It generates, the compiler generates this code, and this code is running on your CPU. And if you don't understand it, that's fine. I don't understand it either. I just found it on the internet. But basically, every this line is an instruction for your CPU. And if you have a CPU running for 2 gigahertz, it means that you can run 2 million of these instructions every second. And the more instructions you got, the slower it is, obviously, right? And this is not a secret. I mean, everybody knows this. And the more PHP code you got, the more instructions and the slower it is. So every one of these lines is a tick in the CPU, and the more code, the more ticks. This is a table of different Symfony versions. I have Symfony 1.4, 2.8, 3.4, and 4.1. And I'm listing how big they are with all the dependencies. I listed, if you run the application hello world, this is how many lines of code we execute. This is how many function calls we have. And this is how much memory it requires and how much time it takes. A small disclaimer though. I ran Symfony 1 in development mode, so it might be a bit worse statistics than it actually is. It was a lot of, I didn't know how it worked. Anyhow, you see these numbers. All I basically want to show you is the function calls goes down at the same time the times goes down. And basically you can, if you have some imagination, see a trend with the lines executed. And this is only for using hello world. You can see the less lines, the less function calls, the quicker it is. Less ticks, less code. Yeah, it goes quicker. But this is only for like a hello world. And it seems weird. We have to execute 1,000 lines to write hello world, right? So if you want to have a real quick framework or whatever, this is the quickest application you can get if you only want to print hello world. And the more similar any micro frameworks out there is to this, it will be quicker for just hello world. But we're not doing hello world, right? We're doing something more specific. So we're going to figure out, like, what is our application doing? Because if we want to, see if I can get this right. If we want to try to generalize, like build a general foundation you can build all application on top on, you basically got Symfony skeleton. That's how small as general it could be. But if we're doing something, I mean, I mean, when you're building an application, you're not doing a general thing. You have a specific thing in mind, right? You're not, I mean, you know what you're gonna do. So we need to ask ourselves, what are we doing? And if we're doing, if we're doing something simple, I have this application. It's just a redirect application. I'm just redirecting URLs. Just a URL shortener. And I think we all can agree, if I was using a framework to make this, it will be overkill. And even if I add 20 lines of more code, it will be overkill. So in my specific case, I don't need a framework. I just build specific things. And you could argue, hey, Tobias, why are you doing this in PHP? I mean, if I did this in a web server, it would be quicker. And that's a fair argument, but I don't know Nginx as well as know PHP, so it was simpler for me to use this. So the first thing we need to do when we get a new application to develop is to figure out where on the complexity scale should our application be placed. Is it as simple as my redirect application, or is it something that is super complex and, I mean, it could even have forms in it? Then maybe we should start over here, right? Or are we somewhere in this area in between, or are we somewhere here? Like a bit more complex than my redirect application, but not as complex as the Symfony skeleton. So we need to, I mean, when we figure out what we're gonna do, we should play a game. And I'd like to call this game, Do We Need This? This is me basically saying like, hey, do we need this? Do we need this component? I mean, do we need security? If we're building a microservice that goes on a private network, do we need a security component? Probably not, right? And if we only do a microservice, do we need forms? Probably not. And if we only have a few routes, do we need Symfony router? I mean, Symfony, don't get me wrong, Symfony 4.1 router is the fastest router we got in PHP. But if we only have like 2 routes, we can have an if statement instead. An if statement will be quicker than a router. No fast, I mean, I want to have some nodding from you. Right, yes. I mean, if we only have a few, I mean, do we need a kernel if we only have a few lines of code, a few classes? And do we need, dependency injection is great, but do we need it if we only have 10 classes? Also, do we need classes? So you should like ask yourself, for every new piece of code or dependency, you should put it on the golden scale and say, do we really need this? And do we need HTTP? Maybe we're only building a CLI microservice. I mean, do we need HTTP? And if we do need HTTP, do we need HTTP Foundation? Or are we happy with just using superglobals? Sure, superglobals are bad for many reasons. I mean, how do you get an IP address, for instance? It's impossible, near impossible. But I mean, maybe we don't care about IP addresses. Maybe this is enough and you can kind of trust this. And do we need the messenger component? Fabian said this is a revolutionary component. I kind of agree. I think it's awesome. But do we need it? Maybe we are happy with using the PHP extension for adding AMQP. I mean, in most, I mean, most cases, I'm not sure I gotta be married to RabbitMQ for the rest of my life. Maybe I want to change it for something else. So I kind of like the abstraction, but I know if I gotta include this abstraction, I have a performance penalty. It might be small, oh, it is small, but it is a penalty. So are you more comfortable with the abstraction, or do you want to just use the PHP extension? Also, Doctrine. Do we need Doctrine, or do we just need the PDO? Doctrine is great, and if you configure Doctrine properly, it's super performant, but it still is a penalty to performance. I must admit that I'm pretty helpless without PDO and Doctrine. I mean, I got an assignment a while back. It was, someone told me to connect to MySQL, and without Doctrine, without anything. And I'm like, hey, MySQL Connect apparently doesn't work anymore. You have to use MySQL I Connect. And I didn't know the parameters. I didn't know anything. I'm too confident with Doctrine, which means kind of I'm awful at writing performant application, but I'm happy with the abstraction. So you gotta put in the golden scaler. I mean, it will take me twice as long if I don't use Doctrine, but it will be a bit performance implication if I do use Doctrine. So I want to say it's really hard to me to give you a general advice how you should build small performance application, but I will tell how I usually do stuff, if that's fine. And you probably say like, I don't like this, but this thing I kind of like, so I use it. So you share a pick from my talk. So this is basically how I do things. I mentioned I use the messenger component already because I like it. I obviously also like the workflow component. The workflow component is a great way to control the state in your application. And you basically, this is boilerplate workflow component. You basically, this is the states I have, and this is how I move between them. And then if you get an article from the database somehow, you can say, am I allowed to publish this? And you can make sure you don't getting so much bugs if you have this workflow component. I mean, I have a small inbox component which sends emails basically. And I have a state from pre-sent, sent, error, and opened, basically. So I know that I can't send a message twice because I use this component. So this is something I do to reduce the number of bugs. I'm also a big fan of the cache component. I promise not to talk about caching too much, but I've been aware of Symfony is releasing a new cache interface. How many of you knew of this Symfony cache interface? Like 4 of you. That's excellent. It's from Symfony contracts. Have a cache interface. When I'm like, do we really need a cache interface? We got Doctrine, we got PSR6, we got PSR16. Do we really need a Symfony cache interface? But then I saw the interface, and it looks like this. And this is an amazing interface. This is the best interface I've ever seen. It's only have one method, and it says get string. Oh, sorry, get a key. And then it looks in the cache. If it's a fail, we call the callable to generate this cache value. And then there's something called beta there. It's from Stampede protection, which I'll mention in a moment. But this is the simple interface, and this is everything you need, really. And I fell in love with this interface, for sure. And you use it like this. You say, hey, I want to get the cache key named foobar. And if it's a miss, I'm starting to calculate foobar. In this case, I calculate pi for some reason. And I store it for an hour, because pi might change. And I have Stampede protection, which basically means that if at time 0 I have a cold cache, and then someone says, give me the key for foobar, then I start calculating pi. It takes me like 10 seconds, and then I return a response. And then on top here, I get more and more requests, and the cache is warm, so it's just delivered response. Super quick, super nice, which is great for my microservices. That is super quick and super nice. But what happens over here with time 3 after an hour? If I get 100 requests at once, what would happen? I would start computing pi 100 times. Because for each of these requests, the cache is cold, so I would start computing pi, which takes a long while. And in the end, we just throw out 99 computation of pi and you store 1. And this is something that happened because the cache is cold. So you have spikes in your performance. I mean, if you ever see spikes on your server, what do you call it, server monitoring tool, you can assume that something like this. The cache went cold, and it started to calculate the cache values again. So Stampede protection is built in this cache interface, which basically means that we prematurely invalidate the cache for one user. Like after half an hour, 45 minutes, one user has to wait 10 seconds to compute pi again. And while the other ones is still getting a warm response. So which means when I get 100 requests after an hour, the cache will still be warm. So if I'm using this, I mean, if I don't have any traffic, it will obviously not work. But if I have constant traffic on my cache, the cache will never be cold. You won't see these spikes. So this is awesome. This is why I like the new cache interface. So these are 3 components I often use that are most fit in everything. But how do I make the architecture of my application? Using the Middleware pattern has been super hip since like 6 months ago, because PSR 15 came out, the Middleware PSR, and everybody like, hey, we can make applications now for some reason. So the Middleware pattern is cool, indeed, and this is basically how it looks like. This is my index HTML file. What I'm doing is I'm getting a new request from globals, and then I define 2 anonymous functions. The anonymous functions has 3 parameters. They have the request, the response, and the next function. And in this instance, I'm just saying if the request method is a get, it's not a get, I just throw you're not allowed here. And if I get to the second anonymous function, I just add some foobar content to the response. So, and then I have a runner. And the response for the runner is to run the middlewares like A, B, C, and then C, B, A, right? So you have a chain of middleware. And the runner is no secret. This looks like this. I just get a queue of middlewares. Then I run them in order. So I have A, B, C. And then if the queue is empty, I just use the default one, which is just return response. And then I do C, B, A. This is the middleware pattern, and I show you basically the foundation of an application on 2 slides. And if you think that, hey, this anonymous function is quite weird, you don't really like, anonymous functions might be scary, and don't worry, you can just slap on an interface, and you'll be happy using the interface. So, as an example of one of these middlewares, this is a router. This is a router with 2 routes. I'm just checking the URL. If the URL is just /, just serve the start page. And if it's foo, just show the foo controller. So this is, Symfony router, again, is super quick, but this is way quicker because it's just a few if statements. Symfony router is generic. If you do something specific, it's way quicker. So my full application might look like this. And this is actually an application I built, or similar to it. I built for a geocoder. So basically, if I get an IP address and give it to the middleware, to the microservice, you give me a country back, so I know what language I should display. Same thing if I give you parts of an address in London, the microservice returns with the full address and zip codes and everything. So this is basically it. I define my middlewares. And the cool thing here is, we've written all the code. This is our index.php file. You saw the implementation of the runner before. And then we've written the cache middleware. We've written the New Relic middleware because we want to have a logging. And security and router. We've written everything, every line of this small framework of ours. And if we want to have some major cache component, we just add it in a cache middleware. But we are responsible for what code we add in our application. So there's no magic, there's no nothing. If you want to have like if you're not, I know that this is a small application, and that's the point of everything. If you have a little bit larger application, you may want to create a custom kernel. Say with a custom kernel, you may have dependency injection, which is awesome. And you may have support for different environments. And you know that the workflow component I show you, maybe you just write that in YAML instead for writing in PHP. So a custom kernel might help you with that. And you can create a custom kernel as simple as this. This is basically, I basic constructor, and then I moved all my middlewares to these handle functions. So the handle function takes a response and takes a request and returns a response. And I use dependency injection here, but this is basically just my middlewares. Oh, good. And the secret thing is in the boot function, which the purpose of this is to make it quick, obviously. So the boot function checks, do I have a compiled container already? Do I have a cache container? If I do, then I use that one. If I don't have a cache container, then I start a new container builder. I add some parameters to it, which I might find useful in the future. And then I load some YAML files. I add the services YAML, and I also load services_environment YAML. And then I just compile it and cache it. So this is as simple as, and this is a simple kernel class that I invented. And it allows me to write configuration like this. So we're quite comfortable with this configuration. And if there was a beginner in Symfony, we could trick them that this was Symfony, right? This is Symfony configuration, right? So I have a small index file, I have a small kernel, as you saw, and I can allow configuration like this. And it's no secret code anywhere. You are in full control. As you can see, I auto-wire things, and I make them public, blah, 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 blah. And I don't auto-configure, because auto-configuration requires you to do some more work. You need, oops. The next slide was the best slide. Auto-configuration requires you to do some more work. It requires you to add some more configuration to your boot function in your kernel. You just let me know when it's back on. It's, say that you want to automatically configure all your event subscribers. So you basically need to say that, hey, the kernel, look, if something implementing this interface, then you need to add this tag. And if something is an instance of a command, please add the command tag. So the thing is, if I want to auto-configure stuff and if I want to make things more helpful and nice, I need to add more boilerplate code to my application. Auto-configuring stuff, you have to add more boilerplate, and if you're getting too much boilerplate, just use the FrameworkBundle. I mean, the FrameworkBundle helps you with all this boilerplate stuff. I would really like to say, yeah, here we are. Use the quickly, look at the pictures. Use the FrameworkBundle. This is a kernel using the FrameworkBundle instead. It's basically the same kernel. I have the configured container. I configure my routes. I configure my cache, and I configure log this and stuff. And it's basically the same kernel. And I was a bit quick because of the slides and also the projector. There's three cool things here. At first, at the top, we're using the HTTP kernel, which gives us this nice event flow. So whenever an event comes in, it automatically registers as kernel request. Request comes in. Kernel request, and I get kernel response, the kernel exception, stuff like that, which is a cool thing using the FrameworkBundle. Another way is you can actually include a bundle which registers all the nice things for you. It registers all the compiler passes. It registers all the auto-configure stuff for you, so you don't even have to care about so much about boilerplate anymore. And also, it's using the microkernel trait. And the microkernel trait sounds great, but it basically just helps you to configure stuff. It helps. I mean, it declares some abstract functions. And I know that Fabien doesn't really like this trait. I mean, he liked the code, but doesn't like the name. He said, there's nothing micro about it. This is just a normal Symfony kernel. There's nothing micro about it. So his point is Symfony kernel is quite small as it is. So to improve performance, I want to repeat my rules, or more generic, buy a better computer, use cache, and run less code. And these are in order for a reason. They go from very cheap to very expensive. And you should, hardware is cheaper than humans. So you should always do 1 and 2 first. The only reason, if you do something super specific, sure, go with number 3. But apart from that, the only reason for doing number 3, it's because it's fun. I do number 3 a lot because I like it, but I know this is not the cheapest way for my company to get a quick application. So I want to spend a few more moments on performance. How do you know your application is slow? You obviously have to profile your application. And you could use Blackfire, or you can use any other performance tools. I use Blackfire because it's easy and simple to set up and start working. This is my application. I ran this in debug mode to make a point. Do you see where I spend most of my time? What I'm spending most time is loading classes. I load stuff and make sure they're up to date. And especially this big error, the composer. Every application has this line, and it's usually at the top. It loads all the classes you need to run your application. And this takes a lot of time. It's been way better if using PHP 7 and Composer. That's way, way better, but it's still not perfect. I've borrowed the next few slides from Andrew Carter. These are the best slides I've ever seen. He basically made, if PHP, the pipeline, was a restaurant. So the client would be a customer, the server would be the restaurant, a request would be the order, response would be food, and the application is a chef. And the HTTP daemon is a waiter. So in this PHP restaurant, a customer comes in, and the waitress takes the order, then the waitress creates the chef somehow, and the chef makes the food, and the waitress brutally murders the chef. Could you see a way to improve of this restaurant? Yeah, don't kill the chef. And this is this is actually what we're doing in PHP. We kill the chef all the time. In PHP, it looks like this. I mean, we have a web browser, and it talks HTTP to the web server. Then it talks fast CGI to PHP FPM that has a pool of PHP threads already created, which is great because that's improved performance. If only using like the native Apache, blah, blah, not the FPM, Apache creates a new thread all the time, which is awful. But PHP FPM has a pool of PHP threads, which is better. And then when a request comes in, we create an application, we serve the response, and then it goes away. Another request comes in, and then it goes away. And since we have a lot of requests, we probably have a lot of these, and requests comes in and out all the time, but we're still killing the chef. So what if we get rid of PHP FPM and implement the fast CGI protocol in PHP instead? So we keep the application loaded during multiple requests. Sure, sometimes we drop one because we don't want to have memory leaks. Maybe we drop another one as well. But in general, they are alive for more than one request. Like, this is me not killing the chef. So this is a great idea, but how do we actually do this? And I have the link here to PHP fast CGI daemon. And it's a great library that helps you. It's a great library that helps you. So the only thing you need to do is to write your application. It's so poorly. The 2 lines in the middle, that's your application. That's your kernel. You get your request, Symfony request in, and you return your Symfony response. And the code around it is helpers to implement this fast CGI protocol. And if you want to, it's highlighted now. I don't know if you saw it. Anyhow, if you do in the middleware pattern, just throw in the middleware application in here in the middle. So this is how you don't killing the chef. And could you do the same thing with Symfony? Sure. You just use a special Symfony kernel. You get the normal Symfony kernel in, and you boot it, and then you run the request, and you handle the response, and blah, blah, and then you terminate it if you can terminate it. So I've talked a lot. I know I talked a lot. And you saw most of my slides. And with these tips and tricks I've told you, I can easily go in the 10 milliseconds. Frameworks are not slow. I mean, you as a developer, you have the responsibility for which code you put into your application. And if you put in a lot of things, of course, it will take a lot of time. But if you are like weigh every dependency on a golden scale and you think you really need this, you can easily go under 10 milliseconds. I mean, you could even go under 5 milliseconds if you're using this nice trick with the fast CGI daemon. And you should also say, is there any reason to go this fast? I mean, if your application responds in 30 or 50 milliseconds, that's probably fine for most use cases. This is just because it's fun. And I did this talk in a media group in Stockholm, like to prepare for now. And the feedback I got was, sure, Tobias, but does this really work? Have you tested this? Or, Tobias, have you used it in production? Yes, I have. So I want you to remember that we all are Symfony, and frameworks are not slow. Thank you for your attention. I will update this. Whoa, you clicked me off. I will update the slides. I will upload the slides into my join-in. Please give me some feedback and reviews. If you like it, thumbs up. If you didn't like it, just tell me like how I can improve. The slides will be there within the 30 minutes or so. I guess we can enjoy the break now. Thank you.